Okay, we are going to make our first GIF animation in Photoshop using frame by frame animation. So I have Photoshop open here. I'm going to go ahead and add a new file. I'm going to make that 1080 by 1080 pixels. You can really use whatever you want. This is a nice size. It's also friendly for your Instagram if you ever want to promote your stuff on social channels. So I'm going to hit create, and you'll see I have a timeline already set up down here, but what you'll want to do is your screen will probably look more like this. You'll need to go to Window and then go down to turn on Timeline. There are two options here, so you can create a video timeline or create a frame animation. Although we are doing frame by frame animation, we are actually going to create a video timeline because that is friendlier to work with in Photoshop. So you'll see when I create that, it just displays the layers that we have over here across time over here in the timeline panel. So you'll see if I add more layers, I get all of those layers reflected over here. I'm going to go ahead and delete those. And what we want to do is we want to adjust our zoom level over here way in so that we can see individual frames over here in our timeline. Some of the initial settings you'll want to set up. If you go into your timeline flyout panel, you'll want to turn on enable timeline shortcut keys. What that will let you do is navigate your timeline with the forward and backwards arrows, and then also turn on, where did it go? You want to enable onion skins, which I don't have yet because I haven't split this. Okay, but you'll see, so I'm going to go ahead and add a new layer to work on. And then I'm going to start splitting this on every second frame. So each one of our frames is going to be, or each one of our clips is going to be 2 frames long. So if I hit the scissors key there, you'll see it adds a new layer and it starts moving these onto separate copies. I'm going to click and drag these down so that it creates a video group just to keep our workspace a little neater. Let's see if that, yes, now I can turn onion skins on, which you'll see what that does in just a second. The other thing I want to do is just to make your work a little bit easier, go to set timeline frame rate, and the default is 30, so it will play 30 of these frames every second. That's what FPS is, frames per second. You can change this to 24, which is the standard frame rate for, as media students will know, typically what we're used to seeing videos played at is 24 frames per second. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, oh, this got a little bit strange here. I'm going to make sure this is 2 frames long. Maybe I need to trim that there to make that happen. Let's go ahead and add that. I'm not sure why that's doing that. Okay, there, that looks better. So I'm going to start cutting this every second frame. So each one of these layers is going to play for 2 frames. And we could do this as we go. I'm just setting us up here so that when we actually get into working, this goes a little bit faster. And there are some plugins that can make this a little less tedious to do in Photoshop. Photoshop is actually not the best software to do animation in, but it is extremely helpful in understanding how exactly animation or frame by frame animation actually works. Okay, so that should give us enough to work with for now. So I'm going to go back and select my first layer, layer 2 over here, and I'm going to use the paintbrush and set myself up with a hard brush, a decent size. You can also use your bracket keys on the keyboard to adjust this. and you can get a preview of how large that is. And I'm just going to start drawing my bouncing ball at the top of the frame here. Doesn't have to be perfect. We're just going to get a kind of a hand-drawn feel. Those of you with iPads will definitely be at an advantage here, and you'll see how nice it is to work with that. Okay, so you'll see as I scrub through the timeline here, what happened when I got to frame 2 is our previous drawing stays on there, but it lowers in opacity, and that is what is that onion skin setting. So it shows us in a lower opacity what the previous frame looks like. And it will also show us the next frame, what that frame looks like. But for us, because we're 2 frames long, that won't particularly matter. But what this is nice for is I can now see, okay, this is where my last frame was. I'm going to draw the ball falling a little bit below here. And then if I move forward 2 more frames, as my ball falls, it will pick up speed. And so I want this one to be a little bit further away. So we were overlapping, kind of just below the middle here. So I want this one to be even further. And I'm also going to start to stretch it out, because as it gains speed going down, we're going to give that appearance of motion by thinning it and making it look like it's stretching from top to bottom so that it's picking up speed and going faster. I'm going to continue doing that. I'm going to space this one out even more, maybe stretch it out even a little bit more, and you want this to appear like it has consistent volume. So as it stretches, or as it gets thinner, it also needs to get longer, and that will make it appear more natural. So I'm going to keep going here. Probably should have drawn a floor in here somewhere. Okay, we'll say that that is the floor. So as it hits the floor, then it will start to squash, right? So go back to something like a regular shape. And then as that momentum and weight hits the floor, it's going to squash down because it's hitting the floor so hard. And once it's kind of flattened out, then it's going to rebound with about the same amount of speed that it had when it hit the floor. And then it will slow down as it gets towards the top of its arc. If we wanted to, we could go back and copy this frame so that we are being consistent in how this ball is reacting. But for the purposes here of this demonstration, it's going to look a little bit jittery. And that's okay. It gives it kind of a nice hand-drawn animated feel, kind of like a cartoon. That one's too fat. So as it goes up, it's pushing against gravity. It slows down, which is why I'm drawing these closer together. And the ball is also starting to squash again back to a normal shape. So I'm going to draw quite a few overlaps up here because it's really slowing down. Let's do one more. I'm going to split this one here. Okay. And this will be our last frame. Okay, I'm going to delete that last one, and then I'm going to zoom back out and adjust our play length to just the duration of our frames. And then I'm also going to go back into our flyout menu and turn off onion skins, because when we play that back, we don't actually want to see the opacities of the previous frames. And then in my settings, I'm just going to make sure that loop playback is on. And then, as you can see, as we scrub through, we get this illusion of motion going on. You can hit play, or you can also hit spacebar, and you can see that we get our first GIF animation. So the illusion of motion here, what's happening again is as the ball moves down, it picks up speed, and we give that illusion by spacing those drawings out more, as well as using the principles of squash and stretch. So we start to thin the ball and also elongate it so that it looks like, as it's picking up speed, the bottom portion of it leads the top portion and starts to stretch it out. And then when it hits the ground so hard that it squashes again and then goes in reverse, going back up. So that's the principles of frame by frame animation. We could, on this first layer here, you could imagine doing as many layers here as you need to. But you can do all kinds of things in here with Photoshop, where if you wanted to animate perhaps another object, you could set up a separate video group doing that, or I could add a fill here to this first layer, except in a different color, if I wanted to give this a background. And then to export this, I'm going to go to File and Export. And we have to use this Safer Web Legacy. It's thinking for a second here. Okay, and then the preset, it might be a GIF, so go ahead and use that. Sorry, my Photoshop's freaking out a little bit here. All of this is okay for our purposes. Set the looping up forever, and this is a pretty small file size, so that's totally fine. You can adjust these so that it can reduce the file size of this if you needed to. So you could reduce the amount of colors that are in here. That would reduce the file size. But for something like this is super small, and so it's no big deal. So I'm going to hit save. I'm going to hit or save this something that makes sense. So if I preview this, there it is.